Arma Wirumque Kano. I sing of weapons and a man. Those are the opening words of the tragic tale of the Aeneid, written by the Roman poet Virgil. It is a story of refugees forced to flee from a doomed city, carrying their fire and spirit with them to a new land, where they would build an empire known all over the world. It is fitting that the system named after Virgil in the Star Citizen universe would inspire a similar tale of tragedy, war, and rebirth. So, come hear the tale I sing of weapons, armor, and the children of Cyrene. My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to the Astro Historian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today we'll be talking about the universe of Star Citizen, specifically the story of the fall of Virgil, and how it and its displaced refugees impacted the verse as a whole. Let's start with some backstory on the system itself and the people that once called it home. It was discovered entirely by chance in 2412 by famed astrophotographer Elaine Victus. Victus was conducting a deep field survey roughly half an AU past Vega's cometary cloud. He had powered down his survey runabout's thrusters and gone dark to capture a maximum scan resolution. Upon attempting to activate his highly specialized stellar camera, he found it unable to starlock because of an imperceptible level of spacecraft movement. Further investigation revealed that the movement, mere microns from what his IFCS had calculated as a standstill, was the result of an extreme proximity, within 400 meters, of an uncharted jump point. General amazement over Victus's incredible luck quickly turned to renewed passion for space exploration from the public. The K-type main sequence star, quickly named Virgil by the Earth spin doctors seeking to instill a sense of regal manifest destiny, was located in a region of space previously thought to be naturally inaccessible. What's more, its first planet was the single strongest candidate for terraformation yet discovered. The planet was filled with what was called super nutrients, which made the process of terraformation incredibly easy. The super nutrients in the soil produced megaflora on the planet, with normal Earth plants, specifically trees, growing to titanic sizes. The world would become known as Cyrene, named after the ancient Thessalian princess and hunter who was said to have founded an ancient Greek city of the same name in North Africa. The Celia and Marlin families were few of the many who traveled to the verdant world of Cyrene to take advantage of the world to stake their claim for the future. For many years, they profited from this decision, enjoying a peaceful life working as farmers, like most of the residents of Cyrene. The people passed their work from generation to generation, as the world became known for its pastoral and rural nature and became even a travel destination for vacationers. Even its largest city, named Kastak, was mostly used as a trade hub to send out the bounty of the world and bring in goods and tourists from off-world. As a result, within 10 years, Virgil was a verdant, thriving human colony. This was a fraction of what most terraformation projects took at the time. The rapid colonization of Virgil led to Project Farstar, the government-funded march outward into the area of space that had now been unlocked with Virgil's discovery. It was second only to Terra for being the poster child of the success of the golden age of colonization and the gateway to the east of what would eventually become the Empire. It was so impressive that within a century from its discovery, it was considered a surefire choice for formal Senate representation. For almost 3 centuries, the people of Cyrene lived the same simple life. Generations growing up in the shade of the titanic trees and tending to their crops in the idyllic countrysides of the world. That was until the discovery of the Vanduul in 2681 in the Orion system would change everything. Initially, the Vanduul were seen as little more than nuisance raiders who were limited to their skirmishes in the Orion system. However, as time went on, larger and larger forces began to show up, until 2712, when a massive horde of Vanduul arrived in Orion, complete with a kingship, breaking the back of the defenders and causing the system to fall. This was the first human system to be surrendered to an alien force since the Tevarin Wars. This would also crush the dreams of Senate representation for Cyrene, as many hesitated to bring a new system so close to the fighting against this new hostile species. Once the Orion system fell, life in the Virgil system took on a different tenor. The idyllic Cyrene was transformed into a military support station to supply the UEE forces deployed to guard against the Vanduul invaders in the neighboring systems. Soon after, the military-industrial complex had become the world's main economic driver, surpassing both agriculture and tourism. Most found jobs working in one of Cyrene's many factories, producing the weapons and armor needed for humanity's fight against the Vanduul. While it is not clear, it's likely that these industries came with a need for workers, and it is likely several of those workers who arrived in the system during this time were Tevarin, as we know that a sizable population of Tevarin lived on Cyrene during this time. The system boomed economically, as the farmers of Cyrene metaphorically beat their plowshares into swords for humanity, with a sizable number of the planet's population becoming expert weapon and armor makers. Under different circumstances, Cyrene may have become one of the largest producers of military equipment and supplies. However, that would not come to pass, as in 2732, the Vanduul began their invasion of the neighboring Tiber system. Because of the siege of Tiber, the population of Cyrene dropped to a few million, as all of those with the means to do so fled. Countless others who did not have the resources to escape on their own applied to the government to help them relocate, but Imperator Galer Mezer IX refused to grant any aid, stating that Cyrene could not afford to lose more workers. Many turned to smugglers to help them flee, but some remained behind, believing that the might of the UEE would eventually prevail. Their faith appeared to be on the verge of paying off in November of 2736, when the UEE conducted a bombing run on Tiber II and destroyed all Vanduul encampments there, enabling them to retake the planet, the Tiber Belt Alpha, and the Vector Tiber jump point. These were likely spearheaded by the infamous bloodthirsty birds of Squadron 214, who earned their reputation for their skilled bombing runs on Vanduul targets. By the end of the month, the UEE Navy battle groups departed the system for repairs, and 2 more remained to pick off the few remaining Vanduul. It seemed that the UEE was on the verge of victory. But on the 29th of December, 2736, the tide abruptly turned. A kingship, accompanied by an enormous Vanduul clan, entered Tiber through the Orion Tiber jump point and opened fire on the 81st Battle Group. Within half a day, 3/4 of their ships were destroyed. Admiral Mira Trilo ordered them to retreat into Virgil, while she remained behind with the 6th Battle Group to hold the line. When the remains of the 81st entered Virgil, it set off a panic. Millions of people who remained in the system clamored to be evacuated ahead of a potential Vanduul invasion. Citing the actions of the Vanduul in the aftermath of the Battle of Orion, the Governor's Council of Cyrene issued a statement assuring the public that a secondary invasion was unlikely to occur. After all, they hadn't invaded Tiber until many years after the fall of Orion. And they added that they sent a message to the Imperator requesting immediate military assistance. This helped calm things enough to avoid the threat of riots, while the Council, with the help of the 81st, was able to organize an evacuation effort that succeeded in transporting over 1 million evacuees through the Vega and Oberon jump points over 3 days. On the 2nd of January 2737, the 6th Battle Group in Tiber fell. Within hours, the kingship and its accompanied clan entered the Virgil system, heading straight for Cyrene, making landfall at the city of Kastak and launching an all-out assault on the planet. This moment was infamously caught in a photograph from the invasion. It shows the charred remains of an imperial customs house, wrecked with white pillars framing a smoking coal-black sky. A cracked signboard lies on the right of the image, its original proclamation of exports having the word "death" crudely scrawled under it. The Vanduul began bombing the world relentlessly, dropping nuclear weapons on the planet, seemingly out of spite and malice rather than any tactical reasoning. They weren't coming to lay claim to the system and harvest the resources. They were coming to kill everything that lived on Cyrene. The Sella family was lucky to survive the initial bombing, and Ponya Sella led her family and the families of many working at her factory into the titanic tree forest, which gave them protection from the bombers. That was until the harvesters dropped. These mammoth machines turn up everything in front of them, animals, trees, rocks, and more, to turn into a slurry used by the Vanduul as their primary source for building and maintaining their culture. In a desperate move, Ponya and a few of her workers took what weapons they had and ambushed a harvester to drag it away from their families as they made their way to an evac point. Ponya would not return, leaving her husband Jordi and 7-year-old daughter Cedra. The remains of the 81st could offer little resistance, but elected to do all they could to hold off the Vanduul while the last transports fled the system under the protection of Squadron 214. The bloodthirsty birds dove into the attacking Vanduul in their Typhoon bombers and Wildcat fighters and cleared a path for the Sellas and many other families to escape. When the final transport made it through the Vega jump point, Squadron 214 turned back to attempt to rescue more people. They were able to complete 2 more runs before they were unable to continue. The Vanduul continued their assault against Cyrene and the rest of the system unabated until nothing save for themselves were able to survive on the surface for any extended period. The surface of Cyrene was reduced to nothing, casting a cloud of radioactive ash into the atmosphere, which created a nuclear winter on the planet. Hundreds of thousands of humans and Tevarin that were unable to escape perished. Those that hadn't died during the initial Vanduul onslaught soon found themselves starving or succumbing to radiation poisoning. The military aid that the Governor's Council of Cyrene had requested did not arrive until well over a week later. By that point, the Virgil system was completely overrun. Instead of entering the system and ousting the Vanduul, the military created a defensive line around the jump point to Virgil in anticipation of another assault. One that never happened. As with the loss of the Orion system, the attack did not immediately occur, and the Vanduul began to harvest Virgil's resources. Multiple scouting missions came back with reports that Cyrene was irrecoverable. In 2743, the UEE announced that they would not retake the system. Suddenly finding themselves on the front line, residents of the neighboring Vega system took what happened in Virgil as a cautionary tale and began to flee in droves, severely impacting the system's economy. Refugees from Virgil, most of whom had little in their possessions but their clothing, suffered food shortages as they awaited resettlement. Some were able to relocate to other systems, but the vast majority stayed near the military bases on Aramis and took any jobs they could. Historians believe that this may have prevented the system's economy from entering a true depression, though it did not avert a recession. Today, over a quarter of the people born in the Vega system can trace their lineage back to former residents of Cyrene. The destruction of the Virgil system deeply affected the UEE. While Orion's loss had been significant, it was a young colony and had not undergone significant development, and Tiber was a sparsely populated mining system with only small settlements. Virgil had over 300 years of history, and was a major system with a world on the verge of recognition. As the heart of Project Farstar, it was also a symbol of the UEE's continual expansion. The UEE Navy's defeat at Tiber and subsequent failure to protect Virgil shook the people's confidence in the military and the UEE at large. This began a systemic change in how humanity viewed the UEE and their fight against the Vanduul themselves. Vega began to harden itself, militarize its own population, and with the aid of the Children of Cyrene, started the process of ensuring that what had happened at Virgil would not happen in their system. The first major event would take place on Selene. Those who chose to stay or couldn't afford to leave worried about what would happen if a Vanduul attack cut them off from the rest of the Empire. So Selene's Governor's Council strove to make their planet self-sufficient. With no native personal defense weapon manufacturer, they decided to create their own. Kastak Arms was established in 2738, a year after the fall of Virgil, as a public-private partnership between Selene's Governor Council and a consortium of local business interests. Named after the first city to fall to the Vanduul in the attack on Cyrene, the company's mission statement was to make powerful weapons available to Selene's public at a modest price, so if the invasion came, all citizens and civilians would be able to defend themselves. Eventually branching out into armor manufacturing as well, their main design philosophy was simple: make it cheap and make it able to deal with a Vanduul. Though the company has long since become private, it is still the reason why the weapons made by the company today are so over the top, relying on melting opponents with blistering energy and plasma weapons, or hitting them with sheer knockdown power with their ballistics. Kastak weapons were built to be able to bring down a charging 10-foot-tall armored alien who's dedicated to stabbing you to death with a spear. Kastak wasn't the only company to rise from the ashes of Cyrene, though. Like many evacuees, Cedra Sella found herself resettled on Aramis in the Vega system. There, she and her father struggled to rebuild a new life for themselves out of the hardships they had endured. Due to the trauma of her escape, Cedra never forgot the devastation wrought by the Vanduul, though found community among the displaced refugees who shared her predicament. When she was 19, Cedra realized the opportunity before her. Many of the refugees around her had been craftsmen in the factories back on Virgil, and had years of experience making defensive equipment. Yet, local employers in Vega were reluctant to capitalize on that expertise. Cedra convinced a small cohort of these refugees to pool their resources and form a new company to meet the rapidly growing demand for personal armor. Together, they would work to achieve their desire to help humanity be better prepared to face the Vanduul. They decided to name the company in tribute to their fallen home. In 2749, Virgil Limited was born. Today, you're most likely to know Virgil Ltd. Because of their True Death line of armor, which became the standard armor in the UEE advocacy. Virgil also gained renown for their innovations in the production of power armor, commonly known as Titan suits. Popular but expensive equipment intended for heavy commercial and industrial applications, such as mining and cargo management. This advancement in power armor would lead to their crowning achievement, building what amounted to a mechanical Vanduul, which could be piloted by a human. Known as the Zeus system, this Titan suit was a cross between a power armor and a mech, standing almost a story high and capable of wielding a variety of heavy weapons. It has been in service with the UEE Marines, who use it as a heavy weapons platform to help Marines assaulting hardened targets, typically Vanduul targets. The survivors passed along more than just weapons tech to their descendants. Many instilled a hatred of the Vanduul, who took their generational homes away from them. 300 years of tradition and memories burned to ash in a single day. We know that the surviving Marlins instilled a sense of revenge into their children, as Admiral Pavlina Marlin expressed by carrying a picture of her family home given to her by her grandparents who had escaped the fall of Virgil. This lesson pushed her to achieve higher and higher results, eventually landing a job in the highest of command of the UEE Navy, hoping to one day lead a fleet against her family's generational enemy and extract revenge for the loss of her ancestral lands. When people asked about the photo, she would often comment that it was, quote, long since burned, bombed, and churned through a Vanduul harvester to fuel their war against us. Unfortunately, her ambition would get the better of her when she was assigned to become the first commander over what would become the floating city of Orison. While she maintained the local defense fleet's readiness, her aggressive nature led to a major accident when she ordered her small fleet to scare and capture a group of illegal miners on the moon now known as Daymar. The Javelin at the head of the fleet, the UES Fleisa, had its engines damaged in an explosion of a fleeing mining vessel and crashed with all hands into the Daymar Desert, where it remains to this day, a monument to the cost of the generational revenge of the children of Cyrene. The loss of Virgil also led to some more positive effects, including the fall of humanity's greatest tyrants, the Mezers. The aftermath of the fall of Virgil caused a deep sense of distrust, frustration, and anger all over the Empire. Distrust in the military's ability to protect humanity. Frustration from the military, who found themselves more and more being tasked with putting down human insurgency rather than the Xeno threats they signed up to protect against. And when they did have a chance to fight the encroaching Vanduul, they routinely were underfunded, unsupported, and ill-prepared. And anger at the Mezers, who not only didn't seem to care about the encroaching Vanduul, but openly and actively used the threat of the Vanduul as a cudgel to keep the citizens and civilians of the UEE under their thumb. It was these emotions which would add fuel to the fire of the anti-Mezer movement, and it would be one of the first dominoes to fall, which would lead to the anti-Mezer revolution at the end of the 28th century. The hope of the survivors of the fall of Virgil was to ensure that what they went through would never happen again. However, sadly, on October 5th, 2945, Selene, also known as Vega II, came under the attack of another massive fleet of Vanduul. Fighting tooth and nail with the aid of the Second Fleet under Admiral Ernst Bishop and Squadron 42, the people of Selene, including the descendants of the Children of Cyrene, were able to defeat the Vanduul, but at a heavy cost. The city of New Corvo practically vanished off the face of the planet. The Devarin district of the city, likely made up of descendants of Cyrene, was utterly devastated. The entirety of upper management and ownership of Virgil Ltd. Was killed. Yet, at the end of the day, Vega still stood. Without the advancements and preparation done by the descendants of Cyrene, things would have been much worse for Vega, which is saying something, considering how monumentally devastating the attack on Vega II was. Still, the people of Vega and the descendants of Cyrene have managed to pick up the pieces, with Aramis getting official Senate recognition in the aftermath of the attack, fulfilling the promise set out by their ancestors centuries before. Then, in a formal display of their ancestral hatred, the new delegate from Aramis, Edward Javier Emil, likely a descendant of the Children of Cyrene, in their first official act as senator, called a vote on the Imperator's formal declaration of war against the Vanduul. He went on to discuss how Admiral Bishop had pleaded with the Senate to declare war, a call answered by the leader of the UEE, Imperator Costigan, and supported by the leaders of the military, the High Command. He further exclaimed that the Polo Initiative, a bill to cut military funding across the board, was rejected by the Senate and citizens of the UEE because everyone knew what needed to be done, except, it seemed, the Senate itself. He finished by criticizing the Senate for delaying the declaration of war in a, quote, circular debate for weeks. He would then call for a vote, forcing the UEE to act with the final, formal declaration of war, finally pulling humanity into the war that the Children of Cyrene had been fighting for generations. Even in the aftermath of the devastating attack on Vega, the survivors have been picking up the pieces and moving forward. Suffering from the loss of leadership and infrastructure, many thought Virgil Ltd. might fall, just like its namesake. But when the dust settled, the company treated the disaster as a rallying cry, reaffirming their original mission and purpose to help humanity survive the Vanduul threat. Under the leadership of the new CEO, Vash Darren, a former mid-level manager and a descendant of the company's early employees, one of the Children of Cyrene, Virgil has evolved once more, transitioning into a decentralized mode of operations and selling off lesser patents and investments to finance the rebuilding of its destroyed infrastructure. While this period of reconstruction is still ongoing, it's clear that Virgil Limited and the Children of Cyrene as a whole aren't done fighting yet. It is really hard to remove the effect that the fall of Virgil and Cyrene had on the universe at large. From advancements in technology, demographic shifts, and political revolutions, Virgil marked a new chapter in humanity, one we are still feeling in the game's modern times of the mid-30th century. I gotta say, the story of the fall of Virgil and the Children of Cyrene is one of those that always draws me in the Star Citizen universe. It might be because since I was a kid, I was raised on stories of heroic last stands and sacrifices of unbreakable people. The 300 Spartans, the Charge of the Light Brigade, the Battle of Sagri, the final stand of Mushibul Benkai, the Attack of the Dead Men, the Bastards of Bastogne, and so on and so forth. I guess that's why I'm a sucker for similar tropes in fiction. See my pretty big Cadian Imperial Guard army. The planet broke before the Guard did and all that. This lore certainly makes me excited to see and hear more about the Children of Cyrene, their opinions on the war, the family stories of the evacuation, and so on. It's elements like this which make Star Citizen and Squadron 42's universe much more engaging and deep. Let's just hope that the developers don't fumble the bag when it comes to delivering on the promise of the premise. I'd like to thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this, think about liking the video, subscribing for more content, and hitting the bell icon to be notified when these release. I'd also like to thank those on screen now for supporting the channel financially. If you want to throw in a few credits, think about becoming a member on YouTube. And if you want a bit more for your contribution, join the Ko-fi or Patreon. Patreons and Ko-fi members get early, ad-free access to all videos, including exclusive early access to my long-running Complete History of Star Citizen lore series. Check those out now on the top right if you want to know what you're getting. Now I want to hear your thoughts on this and any other lore topics in the comments below. And as always, remember, Ex Historia ad Astra.